Hello everyone, Ron again, and in this video we're going to talk about genre. Now what is genre? Genre is the different styles of music that exist. So like jazz, hip hop, pop, right, disco, things like honky tonk and ragtime, and funk and swing, if you know about all that. Anyway, my point in talking about this is that they will each have different rhythmic elements and different instruments, right? So typically in a rock band, you will find guitars, a bass player, a drum set like this one here, and a singer. You might find other stuff too. They collab with violinists and orchestras sometimes. But you're not likely to find the clave. You find the clave in Spanish music, right? There are different instruments like a djembe, which you would find in African music. At least that's where you would expect to find it. And there's a lot of diversity there. And with the diversity of the instruments that they have and the music styles and their objectives, I'm punching in because it might be interesting to talk more about musical objective, right? What I meant by that is that every song is not written for the same reason. Like you can think about this as, say, if you had an army march or a company front, those are written to make you feel a sense of solidarity or patriotism. Whereas something that's creepy is written to make you feel fear, possibly. Something that has like prominent major chords could be written to make you feel happy. And it just depends, you know? There are different feelings and there are different outcomes. Like pop music might want you to dance. African music certainly wants you to dance. And, you know, if you're listening to something that's like opera or classical, they don't want you to dance. They want you to sit there and be quiet. Think of ambient music, they want you to relax or possibly fall asleep. And the same thing might be applied to lo-fi hip hop. So, watching back, I was like, yeah, I could expand on that a bit more because that's really interesting. So that's what I meant. All right, I'm out. There comes different rhythmic patterns. So I was watching a video by Adam Neely, and he was talking about how the way we view music theory is sort of just American, as if our music theory is superior to everyone else's. There's actually an argument that music theory, the way it's taught here, is racist, which is interesting because, wow, I never would have considered it that way. It doesn't bother me, even if it is. It's like, well, we use it as a way to make music, so that's how I understand it, and it works for me. Now, would it be fascinating to learn music from other cultures? Yes. And when I was learning to play drum set, my instructor did bring that up. The book would talk about different cultures. So we're going to do the same thing. So let's think about different genres of music and how they have different rhythmic patterns. And sometimes you can just borrow those. Let's think about Spanish music first because it's very popular, especially in America. A lot of people listen to it, and it uses one beat like in so many Spanish songs, and it always works. It never gets old, you know, and that's obviously this. You hear that so much, right? And it works. Now, of course, there's other music that does not use that beat. But my point is that let's say the way that other countries view our music, if you listen to their music, you can tell that they borrow from us. Especially if you're an anime fan, you listen to Japanese music. They do a lot of stuff very well that we might do here. They rap and they speak English when they rap too. And Korean music, they do the same thing. They take a lot of the elements of stuff that we have, but we don't necessarily do the reverse. I mean, you see things like Despacito, and I know there was a collab that Usher did with Romeo. There was Promise. There's Odio by Drake, where he collabed with Romeo. He was singing in Spanish, and it would just be cool to see like rhythmic elements coming from those places too, maybe. So you think of examples like when Jay-Z collabed with Linkin Park and they were combining their music together. So it had rock elements and it had hip hop elements. There's a lot of rock music that has hip hop elements anyway, because hip hop fits into things. And there's a concept called halftime, right? Where you stay playing the same tempo, but you play at half the speed. That is just as simple as it sounds, right? So the way that would work would be traditionally how you might expect, or at least how I might expect, a rock song to translate into hip hop. The rock would be playing regular time, and then the hip hop would be halftime, so the rapper has the time to say words that sound on beat and they sound like they are moving in the same time frame or the same tempo as the rock song. So it plays a hip hop beat, in other words. So that might sound like this, right? As you transition, and then you could go straight back into the rock element of it, right? So that is the key takeaway from today, is that you might just decide that you're going to look at the way different music places its rhythms, because another thing you might do is think about not using instruments that we typically use, right? Like, say if you didn't use a snare drum or a clap or a snap or anything like that, or even a hi-hat, and you just had like toms and a kick. You might make a song that's like Am I Wrong by Nico and Vinz. That song is awesome. And it doesn't sound like something that we would make over here. A good example to look at for musical quality is like Disney, right? Because Disney, they always go in when they're making music for these movies. A good example that comes to mind is Circle of Life. If you look up the lyrics to Circle of Life and you just think about what it's saying, it's put in a similar way of how I view when Neo writes music, because Neo will write lyrics that are so simple, but they're just so like deep sometimes. It's like he'll just say what he has to say and hits the nail right on the head. Circle of Life is the same way. From the day we arrived on the planet and blinking stepped into the sun, there's more to see than can ever be seen, more to do that can never be done. Part of my own philosophy when writing lyrics is that if you say something that's undisputably true, it's automatically going to hit hard. Like something that you can't argue with, right? Like J. Cole one time, I forget what song it was, but he said, you reach your hand in the fire, you pull it back when you get burnt. You're not going to argue with that. You're like, yeah, fire is hot, duh. But if he's in that song, which I can't remember which one it was, but he structured it into a metaphor. And that was the metaphor, that his analogy that he was using to explain the concept of learning from a lesson. It's a good day to punch in twice. So I'm punching in again. One thing I forgot to mention that I find to be really cool about Disney is that they will insert the musical elements into whatever music it is. Like Circle of Life sounds like it is a song from Africa. It even has African language in it, right? Right before the beginning, from the day we arrive on the planet, they're singing Ingwenyama Ningwenemabala. And I don't know what that means, But I remember that from when I looked up the lyrics because I had to sit there and practice how to say it so I could say it to people, like my friends, and then they didn't know what I was saying or where it was from, so their reactions were funny. It's similar to like the drum speech. But yeah, that's really awesome. Another example where they did that I find to be really impressive and like overlooked is The Bells of Notre Dame in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's the first song, and that song has like several musical qualities about it that I find to be astounding. Like, if you go and search The Bells of Notre Dame and you just watch that, you'll see what I'm talking about. For one thing, the choir is speaking in Latin, right? The choir that represents the theme song of Frollo, the judge who he adopts Quasimodo. Another thing is that they actually have dialogue in between the music. Like the song continues playing in the background. It switches genres, like I was saying, because Clopin, his genre, his theme song is sort of like folk music, like it's whimsical. And it switches from being whimsical to when Frollo is there, it switches to being menacing. Another thing is that everything rhymes with the bells of Notre Dame. Another thing is that when Frollo comes up and it plays the same melody that Hellfire plays, that's actually foreshadowing, right? Like, how impressive is it to think that you wrote a song and you wrote another song into that song because that portion of that song is another character's theme song. And every time it comes up, it foreshadows his demise musically before you ever know that that's going to happen, right? And people say that Hellfire is the best song. And I guess it's just because the Bells of Notre Dame to me is overlooked. Hellfire is in that song. You know, like Hellfire was there first before Hellfire was Hellfire, as we see it in the movie. And I just find that to be crazy. And like another thing that I find absurdly impressive is that high note at the end. Like I really urge anybody to go and just check out that song, The Bells of Notre Dame, and look for these elements and think about it if you're watching that movie. Because it really is amazing. I was every time I listen to that song, I'm like, who who did this? Like who thinks this way? How did they craft such a masterpiece of musical like quality? It's amazing. It's crazy. All right, but that's it. Enough geeking out. Back to the video. So that's just to be considered. And you can look at tons of different artists. You can look at stuff that's here too, because there are underground things and people want to experiment with new ideas. People are adding country to stuff, especially in hip hop. You know, obviously, Old Town Road was very successful. There's gospel. When you listen to worship music, it is very like larger than life, sort of like extremely reverent a lot of times. It does have that element where it repeats the same thing a lot in many cases. When it's worship, it says the same thing over and over. But there's also gospel rap. People get really creative with their punchlines and metaphors, and they can do all the same things in hip hop that is done in any other form of hip hop, you know, minus the things that obviously are different to the message. And that goes across the genres. So that is the main point for this. And consider that, right? Maybe you should look at the cultures from other countries, how they play music. Yeah, take a chance to view how other countries create their music. And you might say, well, why would I go and listen to a Japanese song? Because I get that question if I'm listening to Japanese music. They're like, but I don't understand the words. I'm like, but people over here were listening to mumble rap a lot, and there weren't words to understand. So what does that matter? Anytime when you find yourself just listening to the beat, why couldn't you do that in a different context because it's from a different country? That's the way I look at it. I'm listening to the music. If I understand the words, then that is awesome, but I could look them up. You know, I can most of the time Google what is being said, and somebody will have translated it if it's a popular song, especially if it's popular here. So, with that being said, that wraps up what I had to say. Consider when you're adding rhythms that you will expand your repertoire of knowledge by studying different genres. Because there are some genres that nobody ever talks about, and there are musical things that nobody ever talks about, at least that I have seen. And they're really cool. Like articulation on a violin, right? Like staccato versus legato, pizzicato, and all of those different things. Some of them have crazy names that I don't know how to pronounce. There's one where whoever has the instrument, they turn the bow and they hit the string with the bow. It's crazy. There's things like marcato, and all of these things sound unique, and you use them for different things. Things like tremolo, vibrato, a forte piano, and you hear this stuff, and it's played in movies and things like that, but it's not used. And a large concept that's like that is a fermata. You know, I never can think of a time where I've heard a fermata in a mainstream song that was really popular. So, check out the different genres of music, see what they do with rhythms. You might get inspired. That's the whole point. And if you made it to the end of the video, I thank you for watching. And as usual, have an awesome day. Peace.